Hi everyone, I am just going to connect the wonderful Jen, so just bear with me for a moment. This is always the fun part. So I'm just about to connect Jen from Connected Parenting. So you might have seen that we've recently started working with the gorgeous Jen, who has so much incredible information around how to support our little ones. And today, in partnership with Mastella, we're going to be covering off what to expect during that 4th trimester. So I'm just going to now, Jen. Pray we get a good connection here. It's always a little bit hit and miss. Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. That was flawless.
Oh my gosh, I know. It can be a bit hit and miss sometimes. So I just always cross my fingers, especially with the connection here in the office. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Awesome. I didn't even get to do my big long spiel because it was super smooth and super quick.
I was sitting there watching. I was ready.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I was just saying that obviously we've just started working with you as one of our amazing Kiindred experts, and just how much I love your content, because I think, you know, we've done a few campaigns recently together, and I always feel like I'm learning so much from you. I was actually telling Sabi yesterday, you were so cool, calm and collected on the phone when I called you. You had, you know, 4 boys there. You were entertaining kids from school. You had food out on the bench. I said, I want to be that person. I want to be that home where everyone in the neighborhood just must flock to you and just feel so at ease. And yeah, I don't know how you do it, but anyway.
Oh, look, it's not that calm, and I've got 2 kids home from school sick today, so it's just a juggle all the time.
Constant, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, just to kick things off, for those that have already joined us, hello and welcome. I hope everyone can hear us. Can I get a little wave maybe just to make sure? Are we coming through okay and the connection's all right? If anyone wants to just give me a little thumbs up or a heart or a wave, that would be amazing. And so obviously today, in partnership with Mastella, we did some beautiful videos with you recently, Jen, where we really were focusing on the 4th trimester. And, you know, I guess a lot of what you do. So for those that haven't followed Jen before, you obviously do those incredible classes that really guide us when we're about to pop out a baby and we have absolutely no idea what we're doing. You are the one that teaches and helps people know how to bring babies home.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do a lot of work with toddlers, but one of the things I absolutely love doing is running a class that people attend just after they have their first baby. And so all of this content that we're going to discuss today is great if you're pregnant, but equally good if you've just had a baby and you're navigating those early weeks and months that, as we all know, especially when you're doing it for the first time, can feel so overwhelming because you've never done this before and there's no guidebook.
There is no guidebook. And I think a lot of it, what we speak to, obviously, like you say, it's those classes you do in the hospital where beforehand, so I'm just adjusting my angle, beforehand, where you kind of learn, you know, how many nappies you're going to change and what you can expect and all the rest. But I feel like some of this stuff you just have to learn on the job. It's not until you're there with that baby in your arms where you are actually experiencing it for the first time. And I think that's why it's so great that you are there at that point to go, you know what, this is how we can navigate this. Let's know what we can expect, because I think sometimes, you know, when you've got a baby crying all night and you're hearing or reading things about routines and rhythms, it can really set some false expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest, well, there's a few challenges of early parenthood, but one of the biggest challenges, I think, is the ideal to get it perfect or to get it right. We come into parenthood wanting to do the best job. You know, it's probably the most important job we've ever done. And we've probably come from jobs where prior to having your first baby, you've been able to control input and output, and you've been able to hand in work and get thanked for it. And suddenly you're doing this job where it's hard to measure whether we're getting it right. It's really hard to know. And if you've never done it before, it's a really confusing thing. So yeah, I love working in the area and helping parents with it.
And
I
that's
think
interesting what you say about, about feeling like you're doing it alone. And I'm guessing, last year for a lot of people, that was even more so because there weren't things like mothers groups or a lot of that face-to-face connection. But do you find, it is those moments when you're at home, you're sleep deprived, baby's been up all night, and you think, am I the only one with a baby crying throughout the night? Is this where you see the importance of connecting with mothers or experts or, informing
100%.
yourself, I guess?
I think that information in the lead up to a birth, about birth, but about the baby and about parenting and about your relationship, all of that prep is just a game changer. I think that, because we've never done it before, so the more we can do that. And I find sort of when I'm running the classes in hospital and I've got everybody in a room, and one of the first things I do is I go around the room and I just get everyone to introduce themselves and say, how's it going? And I say, be honest. And as people, the first person is the most nervous and they've got to say, well, not so good to be honest. I'm worried about the feeding, or my baby's been crying all night. And then everybody sighs this big sigh of relief when we realize that I'm not the only one in that hospital room with that baby that cried all night last night, and I'm not sure if I'm getting it right. And so I think the more that we can share that experience with others, the better. And then knowing in advance what to expect around that 4th trimester and how our babies are born, not quite ready to be born, and they do need a lot of help to settle and soothe, and you're not getting it wrong if that's happening. And so if you can know that going in, it's going to help. And then if you can get good quality information from sources like Kiindred, along the way where, we have this chat, and imagine for some mums that just didn't know, or dads, that babies would need so much help to settle. It can just be so reassuring, I think, to know, well, this is all normal, and it's really just about surviving it.
Yes, exactly. And actually, funny you mentioned about the preparation, and I think that was one of the biggest reasons we created Kiindred, or I created Kiindred in the beginning. It was because, I didn't feel fully prepared. I was that person that didn't have time to read books and get too much information. I wanted it to be simple and practical, and, someone should just handhold me. But I was starting to find, I was very lucky. I had a brilliant mothers group, but I was starting to see that we all had the same concerns and questions that were popping up. We were all in it together. And I thought, surely there's got to be an easier way to get this information. There are experts like you that just have so many amazing practical tips that can be a game changer.
Yeah, definitely. And the more, we need I always say, don't be afraid to ask for help. We're not made to do it alone. So it is absolutely about getting, the right information though, and not too much of it, sort of like, not getting overwhelmed, not having, I think if we try to read 100 books, we're going to get really overwhelmed. So it's about picking a couple of really good quality sources of information and running with that.
Yeah. And when you talk about, I guess in your classes, you talk about what to expect in the first 3 months. And you mentioned before about obviously babies not ready to be born yet. I mean, can you talk us a little bit through about that transition and about the best way we can support our little ones?
Yeah, absolutely. So I talk a lot in my classes. I start with talking about the 4th trimester and what to expect, or where our babies are at when they're born. And the reason that I talk about this is that I believe if you can really understand what is happening for our babies, it starts to make sense why we do what we do to soothe and settle them. Because essentially they are born at 9 months and they're really not really ready to be here, and they're born like this. We now know it's called the 4th trimester, and it's because we walk on 2 legs and they've got a large head. Compare us to a baby cow that gets born and walks away from birth. Our babies are so immature, and they just need so much support to feel okay. And a lot of it is this, they're a little ball of sensory system, essentially. And when you compare the world that we're in to the womb, where it was dark and warm and they were held in tight, for the first 3 months, because they are so immature, they are just craving everything that was like the womb. So when we're patting a baby, we're mimicking that heartbeat. When we're rocking a baby, we're mimicking the rhythms of the womb. We're wrapping and swaddling them to make them feel safe and secure. but essentially they are happiest near our hearts and getting frequent feeds. And that's all well and good, except we're also giving people this message that you might want to be getting that baby into a routine. And so people are then going, look, I don't mind holding my baby, but I'm really scared I'm making a rod for my own back, or I'm making life harder, and I should be maybe sleep training or sort of starting all that now. And we now know that these little immature babies just need to feel safe and secure as they make that adjustment between the womb and planet Earth. And the more we can do that, the more I believe that baby's willing and able to sort of get into a routine down the track when they're ready.
Exactly. It hurts my heart. I do see on some of the Facebook groups, someone saying my baby's feeding all night or awake all night, and can someone help me? They should be sleeping more. No, I think it's, there is the message has got lost in translation along the line, and their needs really are so simple. I think, I love how you say surrender to the fourth trimester, because I think that's been my personal experience. The third time around, yes, I had, 2 very active. I had 3 under 3.5 at one point. It was crazy. I mean, you're a mum of 4 boys too. It's the same situation. But I think you just go in there knowing what to expect. You go in there going, you know what? I'm just going to surrender. I'm going to be at home if I need to be home. I was very much that person that didn't have crazy visitors. I wasn't, booking myself to go out to cafes and groups and do whatever. I really just knew that I wanted to be there at home with my little one. If they needed me to feed, or if they needed to be put down to bed, or if I was there, rocking and cuddling, that was okay.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I think, as you pointed out, it gets easier as you've done it, because I think when you're doing this for the first time, you don't realise how fast this stage is going to pass. Yes. So I think, I was the same, and by my 3rd and 4th, I was absolutely able to surrender to it, knowing how fast it would go. But I think also you've seen the horizon and you've seen that it ends. And I think when you're in it and you're in it for the first time, and you don't know that, when this is going to end or how this is going to go, and if you're getting it right. And I think that's the biggest thing, is parents are desperately trying to get this right. There's a lot of pressure. So I think that, I mean, look, it's a much easier thing said than done. I always say, if you can just surrender, think of it like a wave that's going to crash, and you've got to just sort of ride it out. But absolutely, the more we can just surrender to the fact that we can't really control how this bit goes. So surrender does help, and it helps people to kind of remember. I think the other thing that parents can do in terms of accepting it is reminding yourself each day, I've never done this before, and I'm doing the best that I can, and neither has my baby.
Exactly.
And it's the same with feeding. We know that it takes, again, because of this 4th trimester, it takes our babies really a full 6 weeks to get the hang of feeding. And again, we sort of have this, there's a bit of a myth that it's natural and it's organic, and you should just know what you're doing because you're a woman and that's a baby. Yeah. And it is natural. But our babies take time to learn how to do it. And exactly. It's sort of like accepting, okay, so our babies are going to take time, and it takes that 4-6 weeks. And I think I've said to you before, Emmy, that my hardest baby to feed was my 4th. Yeah. And I absolutely knew what I was doing, and it was very frustrating as this little person that didn't know what he was doing, got the hang of it. But he did take that full 6 weeks, and it's such a good reminder that it's so much about that little human, about their mouth shape, their appetite, how they were born, and kind of how ready they are to get the hang of this. So we've got to kind of surrender to also who that little person is.
Exactly. And I think, we get a lot of feedback, actually. I mean, sleep is obviously one of the number one things, but feeding, that people don't realize how difficult it can be. And I think that it's difficult in that you're expecting it to just be natural. And, for some people, there's all sorts of things that might be affected. But I think just reaching out and, having those resources really does make a difference, because,
it's okay to ask for help.
Ask for help. There's incredible resources and people like yourself, but I think it is knowing that that could be a 6-week process, and absolutely. That's okay.
And I definitely think one of the best things you can do if you come home from hospital and feeding's not where you would like it to be, reaching out to a lactation consultant. I mean, they're amazing. Amazing. And I actually got a lactation consultant in for every single one of my babies. despite having fed before, because I know what a difference it makes, just getting that latch right and assisting that baby that doesn't know what they're doing, to get the hang of it. So I'm such a big fan of that.
I had Chris Minogue on call. I can tell you now, she was there. But and also too that my feed, and I know we're going a bit off topic a bit, we're diving into feeding, but I know that even my own feeding journeys, they were different amounts of time for each baby depending on the circumstances as well. And you know, it's funny because my first one I stuck out the longest, and she's the one that had, you know, the dairy intolerances, and I couldn't have dairy and soy, and I was so committed. I never felt or looked better because, you know, it's you're having to navigate that. But then the second and third time around, you've got a busy toddler to run around in. So you've really just got to, take each situation as it comes. But I think majority of people tuning in today, it really is that first time and just understanding that, it's something that's new for both of you.
I think the biggest thing is just knowing going in that, you know, that it is one of the biggest hurdles of early parenthood, that even when it's going really right, it's going to feel messy. Yeah. And so if you're there going, well, I'm doing a bit of formula and a bit of feeding or it's the latch isn't right, or I'm trying and sometimes the baby's falling asleep, all of these things are really normal. And so if you know, if you're just doing the best that you can and it's going along like that and you think it's okay but not amazing, then it's going awesome. It's just kind of hard at first, and it does get easier. I always say feed by feed, day by day, week by week, it gets easier and easier as your baby gets the hang of it. So just hang in there with it.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I can actually still feel and smell and sense the whole covered in milk, and you know, it's like, this is not the beautiful pictures I've seen about women breastfeeding babies, but here I am. Oh dear.
Absolutely.
And just I wanted to ask you actually on the whole crying thing as well, because I think that's another thing I found. You know, you can, I think babies, you know, they sleep anywhere and very well in those early days, but they do also communicate through crying. And I think we automatically think that's something we've got to fix as well. Yeah. So, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and what
crying,
you've experienced.
Absolutely. I think that, you know, there is nothing that can prepare an expectant parent for how it feels when your own baby cries, and even more so when your baby cries and you can't fix it. And I think I've said this to you before, Emmy, but I think we hand people babies at birth and we say, here's your baby, work out what's wrong when it's crying and fix it. And so to an extent that's true, in that if your baby's crying and you're going to think, okay, well, is it feed time, or is it due for a sleep, or do I need to change a nappy? And there are those things we're going to do, or soothing. You know, absolutely. But I think what we don't tell new parents or expectant parents is that crying is communication, and it also is so normal. Yes. And, you know, and that sometimes we can't fix it. And that's the hard thing. And I think I always talk about this as the beginning of parenting. And there are some things we can't fix, but we just need to be there. And sometimes surrendering to this idea, or getting used to the idea for parents that actually when your baby cries and you pick it up and you soothe it, and you, even when you're thinking this isn't going very well because my baby's still crying, but you're there staying calm and soothing your baby, what's happening in that moment is a process called co-regulation, and you are wiring your baby's brain to know they can rely on others in the future and to connect with others. Like, it's the most powerful thing. And I love that, because it means on a really bad day, if you've done nothing but walk around patting this baby, you've actually been building their brain for a relationship. You know, it's the most incredible thing. And I think we don't, I wish more parents knew that. I wish parents knew that it's normal. Your baby's meant to cry. We're meant to soothe them. And that is actually building them for a relationship. Like,
that's amazing. See, this is what I wanted. I needed you to tell me that.
I needed that when I had my first baby.
This is why we want your content in the app, because I think it's so powerful. And, you know, obviously we talk, you know, every day there's a piece of content, but, you know, I feel like so much happens in those first couple of days in the hospital. You're like, I just need somebody to tell me that. And, you know, there are peaks, I know, with crying as well. At certain stages it can peak.
So crying peaks at 6 weeks. It rhymes. It's not fun. But it does. So a normal healthy newborn cries maybe 1 to 2 hours a day in 24 hours if you add it all up at birth. And by 6 weeks, that's doubled in most babies. So it's at 3 to 4 hours roughly on average. And we know all babies are different, and a high crier might cry a little bit more than that, and a low crier might cry a little bit less. But I always want new parents to know that, because when that happened to me, I suddenly panicked and thought, I'm getting it wrong. My baby's maybe sick or got reflux, or, how am I not meeting my baby's needs? And to learn that that's in fact a really normal developmental stage that happens. Our babies cry more. Interestingly, 6 weeks is the point our babies smile for the first time in most cases as well. So I think there's kind of a lot happening for our babies. And again, the more you know about that in advance, I think you're then prepared for it. I always tell couples around the 6th week, if you've got someone's giving you meal vouchers for the birth, maybe that's the week to book in the meal vouchers and get your meals delivered, because you'll be so busy in that early evening with a baby that's often a little bit more unsettled. And then I think knowing that the babies crest that wave, and it gets easier and easier. By 12 weeks, most babies are back to crying, or actually less than they were crying at birth. And that our babies, that's when we've hit the end of the 4th trimester, that we call it. Our babies at that point are ready to be here. And I always joke, that's like the baby on the Huggies ad, is the baby that's all right. The baby we birth is not, a newborn is such a different thing. The baby at 12 weeks, they're reaching, they're rolling, they're smiling, they're cooing. They are ready to be here, and they're sort of okay. And they're needing a lot more help just to be, here. And I think that's when we really kind of find our groove. And so for parents knowing that we're just riding this through and it does sort of get easier, I think that can be really helpful.
Absolutely. And I think too, that again was one of the biggest things I remember learning from Chris. We didn't know each other at that stage, was about, because it all seems to come together at 12 weeks. It's almost like this rhythm starts to form, and you think, okay, I've got a bit of a handle on this. And I think just even understanding certain milestones, and I'm not going to jump into it, but I'm going to say it, the regression versus progression. I think we always think that our baby's progressing, they're growing, they just, when do they need us to dive in there and give them that little bit of additional support? And I think you're right, on reflection, it's always that 6-week mark that I've found that I've been there, at night time. At night time going, what's wrong? What am I doing?
What am I doing wrong? Maybe, and you're racking, like, that kind of, oh, did I start the day too early? Did I go for that walk at the wrong time? You're looking for the, was it the full moon?
My baby leaping, all these things. Everyone just wants to label it. They just want to put a name to it. It's this, or they're teething.
Look, and I just think knowing that that's part of the journey, but also knowing that sometimes absolutely, sometimes our role is, we're going to feed, we're going to get that baby down to sleep, we're going to do some settling, and sometimes it's just, I sometimes say, you say out loud to your baby, I'm here, I'm just here. Okay, I've got you. And I think part of what happens is we regulate ourselves down by accepting, I don't need to fix this, I can't fix this, and I'm going to just accept that I'm in this moment, and this will pass for both of us. And I think kind of staying mindful can help us, because our babies' cries are designed to make us feel distressed by nature. If they didn't, we wouldn't wake up in the night. And so they are designed that way, and we have to actively kind of calm ourselves so that it doesn't make us feel too distressed.
Yeah. And you know what? It's interesting. I was chatting to someone the other day who actually learned hypnotherapy sort of techniques to actually then the trigger of the cry was for them to just be calm and connect. And it was just, once you think about it differently, it actually really helps how you respond, that you're not triggered in a, oh my gosh, something's wrong.
I have to fix it. And again, I wish I'd known like that.
Game changer.
Because I felt like, I've got to fix this and I'm failing if I can't, and it was distressing. And what we know is that our babies are so connected with us. Our babies, our little human infant babies, don't know they're separate to mum till 9 months. They actually think we are the same entity. So when we are distressed, they are feeding off that. And I don't know if you've ever had a calm midwife walk into a room when you've got a screaming baby and just go, boop, 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 settle. It's because she's calm,
Exactly.
Or I don't know, I've had my partner walk in a few times, the baby's cried all day and you're like, oh my God. And then he just walks in and just picks up the baby and they settle, and you think,
Oh,
Oh, but it's because he's calm, you know, he's not exhausted, he's
hasn't
coming
built.
in fresh.
Yeah, you build up that tension throughout the day and that angst, and something you touched on then, obviously connection. I want to dive a little bit more into connecting with our little ones, because I love what you say about the fact that we can do this, you know, from birth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, there's so much more evidence now that we didn't even have when I had my eldest 11 years ago. We didn't know as much about this. Basically, we now know that our little human babies are born wired for connection. They're seeking out the faces of mum and dad above any other face or shape over anything. And they're kind of their primary caregivers are like the center of the universe. And what they're doing in those early weeks when you enjoy, it's something called mutual gaze, where your baby is 30 centimeters away from your eye line, which is the distance from the breast to the eye. Interestingly, nature designed it that way.
Yeah.
That's called mutual gaze. And in that process, our baby is essentially falling in love with our face. And we are defining their sense, I know, of relationship and kind of how they go forward to know how to do that. We're this social species. So I love parents to just understand how much is happening in that moment, but also know that mutual gaze is very tiring for newborns. So sometimes your baby will do that with you and then look away. And it's really important to respect that look away and know that's probably a sign they're very tired, because they actually just download so much information when they're doing mutual gaze with us. So that's one aspect of connection.
That's
but
so
the biggest thing to note is that because again, I've sort of said they're this, you know, the fourth trimester, this baby that's not fully formed, they're mostly physical. So much of the way we're connecting is through touch and cuddles and soothing them when they cry. Skin to skin at birth is just so powerful that it actually wires our baby's brain for connection. But when dads do skin to skin within the first week of birth, it changes cells in their brains, in the dad's brains, which I think is just amazing.
Wow. Yes.
So all of this stuff that we're doing is basically setting up our baby for a secure attachment style. And when I sort of studied the science of attachment, I was so surprised to find out how much is happening in the first 11 months. So you know, a lot of what we're doing in these arduous picking up, soothing, responding, touching, and looking at our babies and enjoying mutual gaze and supporting them when they cry is actually building relationships. So that's what's happening with connection, and it's quite amazing.
Isn't it? It's incredible. And I think, you know, it's just, even when there could be, you know, other siblings involved in chaos, I feel like that even that time of feeding or just before bed, just having those quiet moments. I remember actually we'd have visitors around and I would go and lock myself in the room because for me, that was my time. That was my special time to be there, gazing, cuddling.
And I love telling mums, like, not newborns, because they struggling just to get it all together. But in those weeks that follow, you probably would remember, Emmy, like when you first latch a baby on and they just look into your eyes for the first 10 minutes before they fall asleep. And I just think knowing what's happening in their brains, I mean, so much is happening. And it doesn't even have to be breastfeeding if you're bottle feeding as well. Just knowing that eye contact in that moment. So I'd hate to think we'd ever, you know, set up a machine that just plugged a baby in like a cow and fed them that way, because it is so, I mean, feeding as well is all about connection. And that's why sometimes your baby might need to feed more frequently. It may not be about the food. It may be about security and connection, because sucking is soothing, and it's one of the ways our babies soothe themselves. And so sort of just, again, just understanding that can make you realize what an incredible job you're doing. And I think that's so important.
It is so important. And I think I like that you mentioned, of course, that it's bottle or breastfeeding, whatever it is
100%.
in that moment that you're doing. And that, you know, I feel like we're a little bit guilty of being on the phones and scrolling and, you know, not appreciating that time, which, look, I mean, I've done it quite a few times. I'm not saying I was perfect, but I feel like if you know that, then it might just think, you know what, you can put that down, stick it on the charger and just take in this moment. Because
what I say to mums on this topic, because I'm guilty of it, myself, because, you know, mum of 4, and by the time I was feeding my 4th, that moment where I was feeding was where I could book everybody into their activities and get the phone banking done and scroll on Facebook and whatever else. So I would just try to give my baby that 10 minutes until they close their eyes, and then I'd grab my phone. And so kind of knowing you don't have to be purist about it, but just catching the start of that feed, and then you can pick up your phone once baby closes their eyes.
Exactly. It's being smart about how you use those moments.
Yeah, and also
and you want to take cute photos too. Sleeping baby photos are pretty cute.
The other thing I just want to touch on is that with all this connection stuff and catching our baby's gaze and supporting them, there's just no perfect in it, and you don't have to do it 100% of the time. You're going to miss, as you have touched on, you know, once you're a busy mum of 2 or 3 kids, you're going to miss a lot of moments and a lot of it in parenting. And our kids certainly don't need perfect. They just need present and kind of catching it some of the time.
Yeah, that's very true, actually. I always think back to my 3rd, because I was often, you know, she was waking up. I was rushing out the door to go to work, and then I'd see her just before bed. And I'll never forget the feeling of her when she would cuddle me and she'd just sink into me. And we'd just spend that time together. And I thought, yeah, you could either get really guilty about not being there every second of the day, or accept that that's the way it is, but use the moments that you are together. And honestly, and she still does it, actually. She's 2.5 to this day. When I cuddle her at the end of the day, I can feel that little sinking feeling, and she just really draws in and just needs that connection time.
Yeah, it's 100% quality, not quantity.
Yes.
And you know, 10 minutes a day of really quality time is absolutely sort of better than non-stop attention. Our kids don't need non-stop hovering. They need quality connection. So yeah, absolutely.
That's so important. It's so important. Now, I'm going to flip on to modern parenting, which you did touch on earlier when I was talking about the fact that, information overload. And I always love what you have to say on this, because I think, again, it's where Kiindred was born out of. Too much information, too many resources. You're on the internet, you're going through, it's a long article. I don't have the attention span to be going through that. It's, how do you get it right? How do you know what to do in that situation?
Absolutely. So I think modern parenting has a couple of big challenges, and one of them is the information overload, and the other is that the village has changed. And these two go hand in hand, because the information overload has, you know, evolved because the village changed, and we want the information. And I'm part of this, like, you know, the information's good. We also need the information. We just need to know ourselves how to know what to listen to. And so when I talk about cutting through the information overload, what I try to talk to parents about is learning how to filter through to sort of work out what suits you. And so my advice at an emotional level is, I would love all parents, before they've had the baby, but otherwise in the weeks and months that follow, to sit down and think about, what do we want from this little family we're building at a value base? What do we want to bring down from our families of origin? What do we want to leave behind? What is it that really is going to matter to us? For example, a mum that really needs a clean house to feel sort of okay and balanced, there's no point in telling her, oh, just let it all go and cuddle your baby.
Yeah, that was me.
She's going to go
I couldn't
crazy.
do it. I'm like, what's wrong with me? Like, oh my God.
There's nothing wrong with you. You know, we're all different. And I think there'd be for another mum, that's absolutely going to be the answer. So it's about learning how to think about, well, who am I and who are we and what's going to matter. So for some parents, if you had children hopping into your bed 12 times a night, they're going to go, we love the cuddles. In fact, I think this relates to you. And the other partner might be like, I don't sleep well.
I think Sabir is watching. He's not in the office today, and I saw his name pop up. So yes, this is the dilemma we're in.
Yes, and so we're not going to get into that, but but I think kind of thinking about those values, and particularly that kind of, who do we want to be as parents and how to cut through. So I think for me, you would know, obviously, with my kids, one of the things we've really been focused on is our relationships and kind of our connection. But my boys have the most terrible table manners. I can't tell you. And, you know, sometimes I get a bit down about it, and then I think that's not what we've focused on. And so I can filter some of that out for another family that's going to be vital, that the kids have good table manners. And so you're not going to be able to be it all. You can't be the parent that has the immaculate house, that's back at boot camp, that has the the baby you're very connected with that cooks organic, you're going to have to let some stuff fall through. And our babies don't need all of that. They just need parents that are happy and kind of doing the best that they can. So apart from having that initial conversation where you sit down and you sort of think about, okay, what do we need to make this work? I think that you pick a couple of good sites to follow, not 57, you know. And then the other thing is a lot of that information, it's not actually coming, you know, we blame the internet, but it's not necessarily the internet or books. It's often family and friends.
Yes.
And, you know, your best friend saying, you must do this particular baby sleep app that saved my life.
Yes.
And then you try it and your baby doesn't respond to it, and then you feel like you're failing. And so I just try to say to parents, it's okay. I mean, you might want to try it if your friend recommends it, but if it doesn't work for you, if it doesn't feel right, let it sort of just wash over you and out the window. And same with that advice from mum, dad-in-law, lady at the post office, you know, about your baby's this, that, you need to do this, you need to get that baby in a routine. Again, I think if you can learn early in the journey to just say, thank you so much.
Yes.
And then just let it wash. You know, you don't have to take it all on.
It's so true, because I actually see a lot of those comments online, and it's the whole mother-in-law or the mother, or this is where people kind of, you know, get into a situation because they've been told a certain way to do it. And Chrissy just popped a question up actually, and it's so very true. Like, do you think that this information overload is actually stopping us from trusting our natural instinct? And I think, yeah,
I do a bit. I mean, it's a really confusing thing because on one hand, I know we need the information because this is the parenting and babying and all of this stuff, like we just said about breastfeeding. It's not innate. It's a learnt skill. So information and support is going to help. Absolutely. But I don't want people listening to anything that makes them feel guilty or bad or wrong or that their baby's not good enough. And so how we can assure parents that present, not perfect, is good enough, and that it's good to take in some of this information that's working for you, that's informative, and not everything. I mean, I'm like you. Chris Minogue helped me with all 4 babies. Having one person, like I realized I needed a bit of help with starting solids, and I didn't know, I'd never done it before. I didn't want to have time for 50 books. She came over and said, this is how you're going to do it. And just having a roadmap really helped me. So some information is good, but absolutely my mission is to teach parents a little bit more about tuning into their baby. It's a bit like a very beautiful friend of mine says sometimes, the first 12 weeks is like you buy a block of land and you're going to spend the first 12 weeks looking at where the light hits before you work out where you're going to build the house. But it's a little bit like that with a newborn, in that if we can surrender and sort of just start watching, because as you would know, Emmy, you have a few kids and you realize that particular jiggle that worked for that first baby doesn't work on your second. You know, and so they are all so different. And so if we can surrender a little bit and go slow and get to know our babies, they do give us a lot of the answers. So
absolutely,
it's kind of half-half, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. But I think it goes back to, like you say, have the trusted resources to dip in and not make you feel overwhelmed. But yeah, there is definitely that element of trusting your natural instinct. And for those that have followed me for quite some time, you'll know that my 3rd little one, I was telling Jen recently, my 3rd little one has developmental delays. And I remember in the beginning, there was things even just in the delivery suite that I picked up on. And it was like something was telling me. I saw them pulling at her leg. Oh, no, that's fine. But I kept thinking about that leg, and then something to do with her ear holes. And it turns out that, you know, over the first year or two, that's the leg that now twists out that has a problem. Her, you know, her little ear holes, they discovered, were smaller than they'd expect. Like all of these little things. And I thought, was that my own instinct telling me? I kept fixating on certain things, and I think sometimes you just got to be a little bit in tune and listen in. And if something doesn't feel right, then keep pursuing it.
Absolutely.
And,
absolutely. And also I think that absolutely what you've nailed there is the idea, because often we're saying to parents who have their first baby, trust your instincts, and they're going, I don't know,
I don't know what it is.
And that was your 3rd baby, and you know, you've learnt on the job two times. That's your 3rd time. And I think the instincts really do start to kick in with time and practice. So it's about going slow with that first baby and getting the support to learn that baby, and then the instincts do come, don't they? And
absolutely,
it's so true.
Yeah, but I know, first time around probably wouldn't have had any idea whatsoever. But I think and that's too, going back to how you're saying the village has changed. Yeah. And, you know, your support network around you. And obviously last year for a lot of people that was different and it was hard. Yeah. And also too now for some that have family overseas and all the rest. Yep. But I think
a lot of the, sorry, didn't mean to cut you.
No, keep going.
A lot of the people we're seeing in hospital, like I'd say still at least 30% have family that can't be with them for their first baby because they're overseas or interstate, and it's so tough. And there were some really good parts about COVID. I think, you know, people were able to slow down, not rush straight back out. We saw greater rates of feeding in hospital and more rested mums with less visitors. Amazing. So there were some really good things. But on the whole, the village has been changing for 30 or 40 years, really. Yes. When I think back to when my mum was raising my older brother and kind of to a lesser extent me, she got much longer in hospital to get feeding established. She then came home to a community in which no women worked. The local women would all go over to one house every day, and all the kids would muddle around underfoot, and they'd step in and do your ironing and make your meals. And the community just, you probably learnt to feed and to get the hang of it with all these women around, you know, like almost like an old-fashioned tribe. And we are so much more alone these days. My experience of early motherhood was very lonely, even though I have family nearby. You're very on your own. I think a lot of women would say I've never felt more isolated, especially if you've gone from a job where you were connected with people and you're alone with this little infant all day long. So the village has changed for mums in that we're on our own more. For dads, it's changed enormously because gender roles have shifted. So dads are dadding these days in a really different way. They are in it up to their eyeballs, doing absolutely everything apart from maybe breastfeeding, and their dads did it differently. So how do dads get the support that they need to be the kind of dad they want to be? And so I talk to parents a lot about thinking about the kind of dad you want to be. And again, it's looking at that generation above. What do I want to bring down from who my dad was? What do I want to leave behind? And who can I look at as a bit of a mentor to be the dad I want to be? But the advice I would give to all couples, whoever they are, is that, you know, rather than thinking of the need to find a village to support you, because it's sort of unrealistic, I think, more thinking about if you could just find one friend in the first year, both men and women, that you can be really honest with about what the birth was really like. And on the bad days, you could call your friend and say, I just need to get out of the house. Can we walk the babies together? If you've just got one person that you can just be really honest with, I think that is more powerful than, you know, a village of 20, because it's someone you can really let down that mask with and be real with. And I think that's really just one of the best things people can do, is just focusing on one real friendship. And just as important for dads, I think, as mums.
I think so too. Interestingly, Sabir had started sort of a bit of a dad's catch up, and you know, we talk about parenthood at Kiindred because we are inclusive. We know, you know, there are so many different family, you know, situations, and we want to talk to both. And I think Sabir had some really interesting insights about the dads not feeling like they had anyone to talk to, and that they were struggling with wanting to be more involved, but then they were working, and it was just really interesting to see them open up and say, can we do this every month? Like, I'd love for us to continue this because I needed this. And I found that really interesting. And I like what you say about the one person, because I know touching back on mothers groups, which is such a, you know, you're either one way or the other. You know, some people will tell you, you know, it's too overwhelming, everyone has an opinion, but at the same time, it's a nice thing if it does work and they are like-minded people, because you do have someone going through the same thing.
I think when it goes well, it's amazing. And some mothers groups are holidaying together 30 years down the track. Some mothers groups, you know, it might not be all your people just because you had a baby the same way. But I think turn up.
But if it's one person.
Pick up one person.
Just one. And to also also know it's funny because I feel like I should be campaigning against the time. I feel like, it happens so early on in the process where you're still trying to get in a flow. People are feeling so overwhelmed with feeding in front of people and, having screaming babies. And some people said they when we've done a bit of, we had some questions going around there a little while back, and it was really interesting to see that some people said to me, I feel like it's too early that we're going into these groups. Then I felt like I missed the boat. But like you say, if you just turn up and give it a shot, and even if it's that one person that you connect with, it doesn't need to be the whole 10 or 12 people.
100%.
Having someone.
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence that if mothers groups started actually before the birth, they'd be more effective. So if you kind of got to know each other before you had the baby, and then once you've had the baby, you know each other as individuals first and foremost, and then you're able to kind of be more intimate rather than everybody pretending it's going fine. So yeah, wouldn't it be great?
Wouldn't it be great? Maybe we could campaign for that, Jen. This is a conversation we're going to have afterwards, because it's something I've been talking a lot about with our community. So, and obviously again, changing with the way that things are at the moment as well. I wanted to touch on, and when going on to the whole modern parenting, the relationship, if you do have a partner at home, and you were saying obviously dads and the pressure they're feeling, but something you did recently in one of the videos we did is you talked about how do you dive in and offer mini breaks. And I just love what you say about this. Yes. And again, I'm shouting out to Sabir, you need to learn how to tap out every now and then.
Do you want him to tap out or tap you out?
I want him to tap me out.
Okay.
Actually, I must say, though, I think he has been listening to your content, because he did actually the other day, he said, look, you're sounding very stressed out. Do you think I should do school pickup tomorrow? I was like,
yes,
you know what?
Yes, I do. Yes. Yes, I do. Thank you. So I do. I talk about relationships because, again, we have our first baby and we are so focused on the baby, right? And we forget we were a relationship before the baby came along. And so there's a few key things I would love to quickly touch on. The first is that the early pressure and anxiety of parenting in the very first week, it can feel very serious, and the relationship can feel very strained, and you feel anxious. And I kind of want couples to know that settles, that there's hormonal reasons for this coming off the birth. And also, you've never done this before and you're trying to keep this tiny little fragile thing alive. It will feel stressful because, you're getting the hang of it. And I find around that 6-week mark, things get easier. I talk to couples about holding on to some humor through that seriousness. And I know how hard that is, but if you can laugh at the punami in the car seat, or if you can just hold those moments, you might not be able to laugh in the moment, but if you can have a laugh later that night, I do think that helps. But then the other thing that I think we can really do for each other, because we say to people, fit your own oxygen mask and take breaks and self-care. The problem is when you're sleep deprived and you are kind of learning a new skill, trying to do the best you can, stressed and anxious, very hard to realize, I need a break, right? You just don't do it. I still don't do it, right?
No, me neither.
So if you, within a partnership, if you're lucky enough to have a loving partner that is able to look across the room and see you rocking the baby, looking a bit stiff, or kind of not yourself, like you said, Sabir said, you seem a bit stressed, maybe I should do pickup. If your partner is able, and you give them permission to basically walk up, and what my partner and I used to do was say, I'm tapping you out. So I might spot him in the nursery rocking the baby, looking really tense, and I would just walk up behind him and say, I'm going to tap you out. And he would do the same for me. And we would not get offended by that because we'd pre-discussed it. So that's the important bit, is you kind of know that you're going to do that for each other. And then the other thing that goes hand in hand with that is then being able to take a bit of a break. And I think, again, there's a whole lot of stuff on Instagram about a shower is not self-care. And, I really disagree. I think when you've had a brand new baby and you're recovering from birth and you're like touched out, a shower with a nice body wash and the door locked can be amazing. And I'm not saying that's it. I'm saying that mums and dads can build up to more and more significant self-care that actually is, enjoyable and relates to hobbies you had before. And absolutely you will get there. But I think it's unrealistic to tell a mum of a 3-week-old baby will just go off and have a 2-hour massage or go to a hike. You're not going to be able to do it.
On the shower thing, I was at an event last week, I think it was, and the lady was actually talking about the fact that, you know, even if you're told to have meditation or this calm time or whatever, do you have a shower? Yes. How long do you spend in the shower? Great. There's your moment. Sit in there. You know, just try to relax, put a little bit of lavender oil, whatever it is in that moment. And I thought, you know what? That is actually the time where I just stand there and go, oh.
I mean, I do too. And I think, but especially when you've just had a baby, there's nothing like the water is giving back, whereas everyone else is taking. So I think, you know, it might be a shower, might be just, you know, your partner taps you out and you get that permission to just go lie down for 20 minutes and know that your baby is safe in the hands of someone else. So I think tapping out is something you can begin in early parenting and then build on that, you know. And so, you know, my partner early this year tapped me out for a whole weekend.
Hello.
He went, off you go up to Byron Bay. And, you know, he just could see I was burning out. And I think that it's a really good habit. And the more we support each other instead of I'm doing this, what are you doing? If you can, and then, you know, I'm going to be much more inclined to say, you go take a break too. So I think it is a really great way to support each other. And, you know, we go better as a team, obviously. It's a team sport.
Yeah, it sure is. I had my it was the second weekend I'd ever been away from my little ones last weekend, but I think he cheated because my mum was in town. So
always the way.
My mum ended up involved in the process, but it was true. I actually thought, oh my God, I feel like a real person. And I know it's not realistic in those early months when you've got a little one, but like you say, even if that is that 20 minutes of lying down, and if you are in a situation where you don't have, you know, a partner or someone else at home, it's, who is that trusted person? My mum was a savior. Yeah,
absolutely. And I often sort of say, look, that might be a situation where you need to build that village around you, and it might be about hiring in someone a few hours a week to support you. It might be a beautiful neighbour that keeps saying, let me walk the baby around the block. I think if we can, it can feel really hard to say yes to help because we feel like I've got to do this all on my own.
You don't want to fail. You don't want to feel like you need the help.
If I can't do it, then I'm failing. But actually, your babies do so much better when you take a break because we're not made to do it 24/7. And if we can sort of fill that cup up for ourselves, we come back a better parent. So if you can start small, start with that shower or that nap or that walk around the block and build up to more, absolutely. But know that sometimes we can't spot it in ourselves and we need that partner to say, I'm going to help you out. Off you go.
I love it. I love it. It is a game changer.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're going very well. I always say to Jen, we could like literally talk, I think, for half a day. We would just not stop. And I know that obviously we said that would be an hour on today's call. But if I wanted to, I guess, recap on everything we went through today, and I guess for you to summarize, you know, what are those key things you want us to remember? What would you say?
Okay. The key things to remember, I think, absolutely, is just surrender to that fourth trimester and trust that, you know, it's all normal. It's kind of, you can't control it. You've got to ride that wave and trust that if you're doing everything you can to make your baby feel as safe and secure in the first 12 weeks, then you are doing an amazing job. It is hard, and so therefore we want to bring in that village and say yes to help and accept that because we're not made to do it alone. And mostly just know that there are no perfect parents and that all our babies need is that we're turning up and doing the best we can. And if you are doing that, then you are doing an amazing job.
And simply looking into their eyes is actually helping them build relationships later in life. I love that. I love that. It's like if you did anything today, how simple is that? You're loving your child, you're cuddling them, and you're looking into their eyes. Yeah. Well, I think we've all learned lots from you today. And in fact, I saw a few comments pop up for those that were asking. Yes, we will 100% save this video out to our IGTV. Don't you worry. There were some lovely comments, Jen. I don't know if you saw them pop up about people that said they wanted to share with other first-time mamas. So I think that's just going to be such valuable information, but also second-time mama there. So I'm glad we touched on the fact that, you know, it can get a juggle as you know, you end up with more little people to look after. But yeah, I just think if we could just take anything from you, it is embracing it. It is surrendering. It's never perfect and it's never going to be easy. But, you know, just being informed and taking a few of these little practical tips away can make all the difference.
Absolutely. I hope so.
Loved chatting with you. I'm sure we'll see more from Jen. As I said, you know, her content is in the app, which we're so excited about. But thank you for doing this. I know our gorgeous partners over at Mastella are always, you know, working with us to create such helpful advice for our community. And yeah, I can't wait to see what's next. Thank you so much, Jen.
Thanks, Sammy.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Bye.